Greetings to our viewers in Nigeria and all over the world. My name is Jonathan Ipiaindi. I'm the head of operations and partnership at GIDA. You're watching the GIDA special. Today we'll be interviewing Doshima, a finance professional with over 14 years experience in the international development sector. She also worked briefly in the banking sector in Nigeria. She now lives and works in the diaspora. Today she'll be shedding more light into the housing sector and the advantages that prospective buyers have when using payment plans and mortgaging when purchasing a house. Also, we will delve into the argument of buying versus renting and how the long-term implications affect buyers when making this choice. Doshima, thank you for joining us.
So good to be here.
Thank you. So please, can you break down the concept of renting versus buying and why flexible payment options like mortgages and payment plans might be more beneficial in the long term?
Absolutely. So I think the one thing you look at when you look at renting versus buying is who ends up with the asset. When you're renting, you're paying for a service, a really important service, of course, because you need a roof over your head. But when you're buying, you're paying for that service so that you end up with an asset. You rent and then the money just goes to the service. But when you buy, at the end of the day, you have something tangible to end up with, so to take home with. So that's the difference between renting versus buying. It's so important that when you're spending your money, in a way, you want to end up with an asset, particularly if it's a home. And so there are always advantages when it comes to buying, particularly when it comes to having a mortgage or a payment plan, because we all know that we can't afford to buy houses. Most of us can't afford to just take money and go and buy a house.
Outrightly.
Absolutely. But when you're given the opportunity to pay for a house in installments, that's either mortgage with interest or a payment plan, then you're taking the same money or lower or even higher, depending on the kind of house you're buying, and you're plowing it into your investment, and you end up with an asset as opposed to renting, where, like I said, you're being provided a service, a really important service, but you end up with nothing at the end of the day. So one gets you an asset that eventually helps you build wealth, and one does not.
All right, thank you very much. So how do flexible payment plans like mortgages benefit prospective buyers, especially in Nigeria?
In Nigeria, we know that most of us, like I said, cannot basically take a chunk of money and go and buy a house or a flat. And so a flexible payment plan provides almost like a level playing field for anybody to be able to say, okay, I can afford to pay X amount every single month, and at the end of the day, I end up with an asset, as opposed to I'm renting and I don't end up with an asset. And this is not just an issue in Nigeria, it's an issue everywhere in the world. Most people cannot afford to buy a house outrightly. And so a flexible payment plan or mortgage gives you the ability to own an asset without having to look for the money or cough out the money at once, which most of us would not be able to afford.
Okay, thank you. So what are the equity building advantages of mortgages that renters miss out on?
So when you're renting, like I said, you're being provided a service and that money just goes. It's an expense. It just goes. But with a mortgage or payment plan, the money you're plowing into your mortgage or payment plan is actually buying an asset for you. So think of it as a pie. Okay. You have a pie that costs 250 million naira.
Okay.
And when you're paying a mortgage, you're basically taking a slice of the pie. Anytime you pay off your mortgage, you're taking a slice of the pie. And then at the end of the day, you end up with the whole pie. And so in essence, you're basically building equity. Anytime you pay off your mortgage or you pay that repayment plan, you own a part of that pie. And so you eventually own the whole pie, as opposed to, like we said, renting, where you're not getting the pie, a slice of the pie at all. Another thing that we need to think about is when you buy your house on a mortgage, that house has a value at that point in time.
Yeah.
But then the value keeps increasing as the years go by too. So your capital is appreciating, you're actually building more equity. So I was talking to somebody recently and we're looking at a house that was about 25 million naira last year. And this year is 40 million naira.
Wow.
So somebody would have bought it for 25 million naira and on a payment plan, perhaps. And then now that asset is worth 40 million. So in a year, 15 million, it has appreciated by 15 million naira. And so their equity on that house has increased significantly too. So there are two areas you'd look at when it comes to equity building. The one you're paying for monthly, but also the one that is happening as a result of your land, building, house, flats appreciating over time.
Okay, so how does the stability of a mortgage plan compare to the potential increase in renting over time?
So a payment plan or mortgage is static, particularly in Nigeria, where you can have a 30-year fixed mortgage. So you know exactly how much you're paying every single month, or a payment plan where you you arrange with the developer to pay at X time. The payments are exact. It does not change. I know some developers might say it has the potential to change, but maybe not significantly. So when you sign contracts, it might. They would write a caveat that it has the potential to change, but you know exactly what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
As opposed to your rent, where this year your rent is 700,000, for example, and then in a year's time, it's gone up by 50%. I know that the average rate increase, I think this was in 2021, in Nigeria was between 35 to 50%.
For renters.
So when I was looking at, how has rent appreciated over time or increased over time, I was actually shocked that between 35 to 50% your rent is going up. So actually, one thing it does too is it reduces your ability to even save to buy a house.
Yeah, true.
Because now you have a fixed income. How many people's salaries go up by 35 to 50%? But then your rent is going up by that percentage. So having static payments that you have agreed to and then ending up with an asset is extremely more beneficial than paying your rent and then that money just going to a landlord.
Yes.
And like I said, they're providing a service which is important, but you're not going to end up with that house. And a lot of people in Nigeria also make the house conducive to them, so they would maybe repaint the house. So you're actually investing in a house that you do not own.
Yeah.
Because you want it to be comfortable for your family. And so you're actually putting money into the house. And the house's value as a result of all the things you're doing is appreciating, but you don't end up owning the house.
True.
So look at your repayment plan that is static as opposed to your rent that is going up 35 to 50% a year. It's almost a no-brainer.
So you end up saving basically.
Exactly.
Paying a mortgage.
Not only saving, but you end up with an asset, which is important.
All right. So in what ways would you say a mortgage can increase an individual's net worth compared to an individual that is renting the property?
Yeah. So to understand your net worth, you have to look at all your assets and you have to look at all your liabilities. So your assets minus your liabilities is your net worth.
Yeah.
A house is an asset. So for example, I'm currently a renter aspiring to also get my mortgage. When I do my budget every month, I have a savings and investment line.
Yeah.
I have a giving line and I have a bills line. My mortgage would go into my savings and investment line. Currently, my rent goes into my bills line because your house basically ends up as an investment. When you look at your personal balance sheet, your house, the equity you built in your house is an asset. The money you're still owing the mortgage bank or the developer is a liability.
Yeah.
But your assets keep increasing as you keep paying off your mortgage or you're paying on your payment plan. As opposed to rent, that is always an expense. So your net worth is not increasing at all because, of course, you're paying your rent.
Yeah.
That money is just going as an expense. It's just a bill. So you don't see that money increasing at all.
Yeah.
So over time, you keep paying an expense and you end up with, like I said, nothing. That's savings and investment line for me. When I get a mortgage, the mortgage payment itself, not the mortgage interest, in case there are accountants there that know that your mortgage interest is an expense, but your mortgage payment itself is an investment because I look at my personal balance sheet and I see that, my under land and building, my assets are increasing. So that increases your net worth.
So is your money basically working for you?
Your money is working for you. You really put in an effort, because this is also something you need. You need a roof over your head.
Yeah.
And a lot of people use their house to build wealth. So by the time you finish paying off your house, imagine you finish paying off your house. A house is the biggest expense on most people's budgets. When you're looking at your budget, look at the percentage you're paying on rents. It's one of the biggest most people pay. It's bigger than food, it's bigger than fuel. So basically, by the time you finish paying off your house, you don't have to pay anything anymore, right?
Yeah.
You have money to invest in other things.
Yes.
As opposed to renting, it's indefinite. You have to always have a roof over your head. So that is an indefinite expense if you don't at a point say, okay, no, I need to start working towards owning my house. And that is the difference. And it is significant over time. There was a research done in the US, and it found out that people who owned a house by mortgage, so people who had a mortgage or had bought their house, they were significantly doing better than people who were renting by 40 times. So basically,
40 times.
Yes. So people who had their house,
Yeah.
their net worth on average was $255,000, as opposed to people who were renting, their net worth was $6,300. So you can imagine the disparity between, and that's different reasons, of course. Your equity is building. You have an asset that you've been paying for. So that chunk of money you'd have been paying for rent, you're actually investing in an asset that is building your net worth over time. Because like I said, a building, your house will go under your personal balance sheet as an asset. And so your net worth is growing as a result of your assets being more than your liabilities. And your liabilities keep reducing over time, because even if you get a mortgage, it's a liability because you're owing the bank or you're owing the developer, but as you pay it up, that reduces your liabilities and increases your assets. Okay. And when you look at your personal balance sheet, when it comes to for renting, like I said, is an expense. You just spend it. It gives you a service. It gives you a house, a roof over your head, but then that's it. You end up with no assets. And then your time renting.
I would like to ask, what are like the psychological benefits of owning a house over a mortgage?
I think there's several things, and I can speak as a renter. So one is just being able to make the place your own.
Yeah.
How much investment can you invest in a house you're renting? Because you're renting the house. If you take all your money and you plow it into that place, it's not your own. So you want to live in a house that is as comfortable as possible for you and your family, but also you had reservations because this is not, you don't own the house, and that money you could have been plowing into, you're plowing to the house, you could plow into something else. The second one is just peace of mind. The house is yours. You're paying for it. You have a title deed that says it is yours. Nobody can come and say move out of the house, of course, unless you breach your payment terms or anything like that. But the house is yours basically, and also nobody can come and tell you it's going to increase in price. Yeah. You're on a fixed salary. You have peace of mind knowing at least we have a roof over our heads. The other things, they're variable expenses. We can say, okay, we can change this and that, but this is the most important thing we need. We need a roof over our heads to be able to even have good well-being, to sleep well, to be able to go to work and come back, to have security and safety. So there are just so many benefits of knowing that you have a safe place for you and your family to come back to. And your rent is not going to increase by 50%, or your landlord is not going to come back and say, we want you out of this house because we're going to give it to someone else, or we're going to sell the house. So those are some of the benefits that I think you have buying over renting.
Okay, thank you. So how does the predictability of a fixed rate mortgage plan help in finance planning compared to like the variable costs of renting?
I think this feeds really well into the previous question. So when you're doing a financial plan, you want things to be as predictable as possible so that you can kind of know the outcome. You want to be able to predict with some certainty the outcome. So you're planning for 5 years, 10 years, wherever you're planning. And this is your biggest expense. If you make your biggest expense predictable, you have a higher chance of your financial plan being what you want it to be. So if, for example, my rent is 500,000 naira every year, and I'm planning, okay, I know my salary is X amount, and I know exactly how much I'm going to pay for rent, which is my biggest expense, then I can plan other things. I can even plan, okay, I can afford to send my kids to this school because I want them to get a better education. Or I can afford to, buy a car in this year because my car is not working well now. If you're renting and you've made your financial plan, even for year one, for 2024 that we've just entered, and then all of a sudden your landlord comes and says, I'm increasing the rent in February when you're renewing, your plans just go out the drain. And I understand how hard it is to just go and get extra income like that. It just doesn't work that way. Most of us have a fixed income. And so it basically thwarts your financial plan. Having mortgages that you can kind of say, okay, I know exactly what I'm paying, and this is why people love to fix.
Yeah.
They know exactly where they're paying. There's predictability. I can plan properly. I can plan for growth and financial success, as opposed to, my plans just changing completely because of this one expense that happens to be my largest expense. You might not have planned to even move house, and your landlord comes and says, we're not renewing your contract. And now you have to start looking for a house. You have to pay the agent, all the fees that come with moving house. So that predictability of having a stable mortgage or repayment plan is so important for your financial success.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've come to the end of the interview. I think a lot has been learned today. Thank you for shedding so much light on this topic, for a lot of experience. And we thank you for joining us, Toshima. That's all we have for you today. I hope you'll be able to learn a few things. I'll be able to impact some knowledge on your decision making. And until next time, goodbye.